Before we begin, turn down the lights. Let the silence settle, because the story you think you know, the sweet, harmless tale of a girl who slept for 100 years, was never meant to comfort anyone. No, this tale in its oldest bones was carved from fear, from hunger, from violence, from nights when the world outside the door felt too large, too merciless, too wild to face. There is a castle the old stories speak of, not one of glittering towers and soft melodies, but a fortress swallowed by its own silence. A place where everything stopped in a single breath. And deep inside that fortress, on a bed untouched by time, lies a girl who never wakes. A girl not kissed awake, but frozen in a fate so heavy and so cruel that even nature recoiled around her, wrapping itself in vicious brambles, like a beast guarding its own corpse. The tale we know today was scrubbed clean, sanitized, shaped into a romance, a pretty myth for nurseries, but the truth is something else entirely. The truth is older than the Grimm brothers, older than Perrault, older than the Christian kingdoms that tried to erase it. The truth lies buried in Europe's earliest fears, fears of curses, fate, the power of women, the cruelty of kings, and the violence lurking behind the gentlest stories. This story begins with a prophecy. Not the elegant type whispered by jeweled fairies, but a curse laid with bitterness, spite, and the weight of a lifetime's resentment. It continues with a forbidden room, a forbidden machine, and a forbidden fate. And it ends with a moment so disturbing that generations of storytellers covered it with sugar until the rot beneath was forgotten. But rot does not disappear. It spreads. Tonight, we peel back the layers. We return to the beginning, not the one printed in golden books, but the one whispered by witches, midwives, and old women with firelight in their eyes. We return to the world that first birthed Sleeping Beauty. And there in the forgotten dark, we find a tale not of love, but of violation. A tale not of destiny, but of doom. A tale not of magic, but of deep human cruelty. So listen, listen carefully, because what follows is not a bedtime story. It is a grave being reopened, and everything inside is still breathing. Long before Sleeping Beauty became a jewel in the crown of children's literature, it lived in whispered folklore, passed from one trembling storyteller to the next, each adding their own shard of fear. The earliest versions were not written at all. They were spoken in huts battered by winter winds, in taverns choking with smoke, in forests where people traveled only in groups and never after dark. To understand this story, its cruelty, its violence, its symbolism, we must step backward. Back into the world that created it. A world where childbirth could kill a queen, a midwife could be accused of witchcraft for a single wrong breath, a famine could erase half a kingdom, kings believed destiny could be bargained with, and curses were as real as the ground beneath one's feet. In such a world, nothing was written gently, and nothing was created for entertainment alone. The tale that would one day become Sleeping Beauty was shaped by the anxieties of medieval Europe. Curses, fate, womanhood, blood, inheritance, and death. It is from this world that an ancient legend emerged, one of a longed-for child, a bitter slight, and a curse sealed not with magic, but with vengeance. The earliest storytellers did not care for morality lessons. Their tales were warnings, warnings about pride, about carelessness, about the illusion of safety, warnings about the price of trying to escape fate. The spinning wheel, the spindle, the blood, these were not symbols of romance. They were symbols of labor, womanhood, danger, and the thin line between life and death. In rural villages, spinning was one of the most dangerous tasks a woman performed. The tools were sharp. The work was endless. The injuries were common and often infected. So the idea of a young girl bleeding from a spindle and falling into eternal sleep was not an impossible fantasy. It was a fear that lived in every household. And so the tale passed through generations, changing, growing, darkening, absorbing the fears of each era it crossed. By the time it reached Italy in the 1600s, it had become something far more brutal. A story of a sleeping woman violated, a kingdom consumed, and a tragedy hidden beneath royal power. By the time it reached France in the 1700s, it grew more refined, but still carried its sinister core. And by the time it arrived in Germany, the Grimm brothers, collectors of Gothic terrors, added their own signature darkness. Yet none of these compare to the earliest whispers, the ones untouched by politeness, unfiltered by morality, unsoftened by the hands of children's publishers. Tonight we will trace the path from those ancient whispers to the tale we know now, from terror to tragedy to sanitization, from the true horror to the bedtime lie. This is the journey into the real Sleeping Beauty, a tale absolutely terrifying and never meant for children. Every myth begins long before it is written, and every fairy tale carries beneath its skin the scars of the world that birthed it. Sleeping Beauty is no exception. To understand its darkness, we must first understand the world that shaped it, a world of fear, famine, superstition, and shadows. A world where a single curse could doom an entire kingdom. Before Europe had kings, before it had courts or cathedrals, there were the storytellers. Women, old, weathered, wise, passing tales from mouth to mouth like fragile embers. Among these ancient stories was one about a maiden who falls into unnatural sleep, a curse tied to blood, a powerful woman slighted, a kingdom collapsing into silence. It was not yet called Sleeping Beauty. It had no princesses, no castles, no romance. It was simply a warning about anger, about betrayal, about the dangerous women men feared and needed. These early versions were told in huts, not palaces. Told by torchlight, not chandeliers. Told to adults, not to children. And their purpose was survival. The fairies in the modern tale are bright, glittering creatures, but in the old world they were nothing like that. They were based on real people, the wise women, midwives, healers, spirit workers, loved by some, feared by many. They delivered babies, they cured sickness, they brewed potions, they read omens in blood. And because they held knowledge, they also held power. If a king angered one of them, she could ruin him with words alone. This is where the curse originates, not from a wand, but from women society depended on and distrusted. So the earliest sleeping maiden was not cursed by a fairy. She was cursed by a midwife or a spiritual woman whose help had been sought for childbirth and then forgotten. A slight, a grudge, a revenge, that is the original seed of the story. The first written version of this tale appeared in 1634 by Italian writer Giambattista Basile in a collection called the Pentamerone. Its title was not Sleeping Beauty. It was Sun, Moon, and Talia, and it was horrific. There was no spinning wheel ban, no fairy godmothers, no prince's kiss, no love. A young woman named Talia falls into a deep sleep after touching a poisonous flax shard. A king, not a prince, enters the castle, finds her asleep, and violates her unconscious body. She becomes pregnant and gives birth while still sleeping. The babies, in trying to nurse, suck the flax splinter from her finger. Only then does she awaken. This was the earliest foundation of Sleeping Beauty's awakening. Not romance, not destiny, but assault. This is the darkest root. This is the original blueprint, and everything written after was an attempt to soften this unbearable truth. In the 17th century, French writer Charles Perrault retold the story. He removed some brutality but kept the core themes: the curse, the spindle, the long sleep, the hidden fear of female power, the danger of fate. But he added another horror. The prince's mother is an ogre who attempts to eat Sleeping Beauty and her children in secret. Sleeping Beauty was never meant to be light, never meant to be sweet, never meant to be read before bed. It was born from aristocratic nightmares: inheritance, legitimacy, violence, cannibalism, and the fragile thread keeping royal lines alive. When the Grimm brothers collected the tale in the 1800s, Europe was steeped in superstition. Their version, Little Briar Rose, removed the sexual violence but added ominous woods, deadly thorns, and an atmosphere thick with dread. Sleeping Beauty's 100-year sleep was not a magical nap. It was a symbol of death, of plague, of the passage of time that destroys everything. The Grimms brought the tale back to its roots, dark, oppressive, ominous. But even they softened the truth. Even they buried the earliest horror. Even they could not bring themselves to record the real original ending. That truth sat hidden, waiting. To understand why Sleeping Beauty survived for centuries, we must understand the fears it mirrored. A woman slighted becomes the villain. A woman with knowledge becomes dangerous. The spindle's prick symbolizes the risks of childbirth, a life-or-death event in medieval society. The story reflects nightmares about bloodlines interrupted, kingdoms collapsing, heirs lost to fate. The curse cannot be stopped. No power, not wealth, not armies, not prayer can prevent destiny. A sleeping maiden in a silent castle was the perfect vessel for the era's deepest anxieties. This story survived because it spoke to the fears people could not name, until today. Every fairy tale hides a wound stitched with sweetness, wrapped in ribbons and fed to children like a bedtime lullaby. But some wounds are so deep, so infected, so ancient, that centuries of retelling could not close them. Sleeping Beauty is one of them. A story polished until it sparkled, while its rotten core was pushed deeper into silence. To understand its darkness, to see what lies beneath the pretty colors, we must reopen those wounds. We must peel back the petals and smell the rot beneath the roses. We must confront the truths that storytellers tried to bury under silk gowns, enchanted forests, and manufactured romance. The truth about the curse. The truth about the maiden. The truth about the man who found her. And most importantly, the truth about why this story was ever told in the first place. This is not fantasy. This is not magic. This is history wearing a mask. Tonight we tear that mask apart. Not a fairy, not a glittering spirit, but a real woman that society feared and needed. In the softened modern tale, the curse comes from a fairy who wasn't invited to a celebration. But the original curse came from something far more unsettling. It came from a woman whose knowledge frightened kings, a midwife, a healer, a keeper of old-world secrets, the type of woman who lived on the edge of villages, half respected, half feared, but always needed. A childless queen would beg her for miracles. Noblewomen hid her herbal brews in secret. Kings relied on her whispers when the palace physicians failed. And yet, if anything went wrong, a miscarriage, a stillbirth, a death, the blame fell entirely on her shoulders. She was honored when useful, discarded when inconvenient, and punished whenever fear needed a target. So the fairy's curse was not about wings or wands. It was the story of a woman whose respect was denied, whose voice was dismissed, whose grief and anger hardened into vengeance. The curse was never a spell. It was an old, whispered truth. A woman you offend is a woman you should fear. In the clean, modern retelling, the spindle is just an object, a tool, harmless. But in ancient folklore, the spindle was a symbol soaked in blood, fear, and destiny. The prick of the finger was not an accident. It represented the first blood, the moment a girl crosses the threshold into womanhood. A moment both sacred and terrifying. Spinning was not a gentle craft. The tools were sharp, the work exhausting. Wounds festered. Infections followed. Women died. Every spin of the wheel was a gamble with mortality. In ancient mythology, 3 women, the fates, spun the threads of human destiny. Every life, every death, every sorrow. To touch the spindle was to touch one's doom. Girls were forbidden from touching tools of adult women. The spindle symbolized secrets they were not yet allowed to know. So when the princess touches it, she breaks a sacred boundary. And society punishes her, not with magic, but with silence. The sleep is the death of innocence and the birth of irreversible womanhood. The thorns in the story are often seen as divine protection, nature shielding the maiden. But in the earliest versions, the thorns were nature's rebellion, a violent reaction to a violent act. The land itself rejects the violation. The castle becomes a sealed tomb. The brambles do not protect the girl, they imprison the secret. Everything inside falls into unnatural stillness. A society frozen, a generation erased. The thorns are not decoration, they are accusation, they are nature whispering. Something terrible happened here. This is where the fairy tale stops being a story and becomes a nightmare. In the original tale, Sun, Moon, and Talia, the man who finds the sleeping maiden does not kiss her. He assaults her. He enters the silent castle. He sees a powerless girl, and he violates her. Then he leaves without shame, without guilt, without consequence. She remains asleep, her body carrying trauma she could not fight and could not remember. She becomes pregnant in her sleep. The prince represents aristocratic entitlement, royal impunity, patriarchal violence, and the exploitation of voiceless women. The sleeping maiden is society's silence made flesh. In the oldest version, the maiden wakes not because of love, but because of pain, the pain of childbirth. She wakes into horror, into motherhood she never chose, into a life stolen from her. She is told to accept it, to forgive the man, to marry him, to raise his children. Her awakening is not the beginning of a romance, it is the beginning of a life sentence. For centuries, people erased the darkness, not by accident but intentionally. Christian moralists removed the violence. Royal families refused to allow stories where kings acted like predators. Publishers wanted sanitized tales for innocent children. Society preferred obedience over awareness. Piece by piece, the truth was cut out. The story bleached until it sparkled. But beneath the glitter, the skeleton remained. Tonight, we exhume it. Sleeping Beauty resonates because it is not just a story. It is a collective memory of human fear. It symbolizes the fear of losing control, the fear of being silenced, the fear of violation during helplessness, the fear of time stealing everything, and the fear of waking up to a reality you never wanted. Sleeping Beauty is not a fairy tale. It is psychological horror, a portrait of trauma, silencing, and the destruction caused when society decides a woman's suffering does not matter. Up until now, we have walked through horrors disguised as folklore. The violence, the violation, the silence wrapped in thorns. The darkest events of the Sleeping Beauty legend have been laid bare piece by piece, like bones pulled from a forgotten grave. But what comes next, what you're about to hear, is what the tale was always building toward. The reason it survived plagues, wars, and censorship. The reason mothers whispered it and daughters listened with wide, fearful eyes. The reason this story spread through Europe like a shadow walking on its own legs. This is the twist, the hidden message carved into the bones of the story. The truth that was never meant for children, only for those old enough to understand what was really being warned. You see, the true horror was never the sleep. It was the silence that surrounded her fate, a silence deeper than death, colder than any curse. For centuries, women were forbidden to speak about abuse, to accuse kings, to expose the cruelty hiding behind royal walls. Talking meant danger. Talking meant punishment. Talking meant disappearing. So storytellers carved the truth into legends, into symbols, into fairy tales that seemed innocent but bled reality beneath the surface. Sleeping Beauty became a vessel for the unspeakable, a container for every woman who was forced to endure in silence. Her sleep was not magic. It was helplessness, the paralysis of a girl trapped in a world she did not choose. A girl frozen not in time, but in fear. She could not cry out, could not resist, could not even witness what was stolen from her. The silence was not her curse, it was the world's. For generations, people believed the thorns were a spell, a wall of magic meant to trap her forever. But in the oldest symbolism, in the versions whispered before scribes softened them, the thorns were not a prison. They were protection. The world outside was violent, unforgiving, filled with men who believed power gave them the right to take anything, even a girl's life, even her body, even her future. So the earth responded. Nature rose to defend her when society would not. The vines curl outward, not inward. They push intruders back. They guard her chamber like a shield, a final act of mercy from a world that had already failed her. The forest grows because something had to protect her, and it wasn't going to be humans. The thorns are not evil. They are guardians, the only characters in the tale who never betray her. In modern retellings, a prince arrives as a savior, pure, gentle, devoted. But that version was crafted for children. In the earliest manuscript, the man who finds her is not a hero, not noble, not righteous, not loving. He is a warning, a reflection of the world's darkest truth, that a man in power could do anything he wished to a girl who could not resist, and society would look away. This is why, in the original tale, her awakening is not a miracle. It is a tragedy, a brutal recognition that innocence can be stolen even from someone who cannot move. It is not a kiss. It is not romance. It is power unquestioned and unchecked. The sleeping maiden gives birth while unconscious. Her children are not symbols of hope. They are symbols of consequence, of trauma multiplied, passed silently from mother to child. But in folklore, babies also represent truth, truth that cannot be hidden, buried, or silenced. They bring the secret into daylight. They force the story to turn, to confront what has been done. Their birth is not a blessing. It is the beginning of accountability. And now we reach the true twist. The story is not about Sleeping Beauty at all. Her tale is not truly hers. It is about everyone around her and how they react to a powerless girl, the king's violence, the queen's jealousy, the kingdom's silence, the fairy's failed protection, the forest's desperate defense. Every character exposes something, their morality, their hunger for power, their fear of a woman who cannot be controlled. She becomes a mirror held up to humanity, and humanity does not look heroic. It looks guilty. Why did a tale so dark, so violent, so uncomfortable survive for nearly 1,000 years? Because women kept it alive. They whispered it in kitchens, in fields, while spinning wool, while raising daughters who needed to understand the world before it understood them. Not to entertain, but to warn. Sleeping Beauty spread because the world stayed the same, because silence still protected the wrong people, because girls still lived in fear of the ones who held power over them. The tale lingered because its warning never stopped being relevant. Even now, strip away the glitter, the tiaras, the pastel gowns, and the fear remains. In every version, Italian, French, German, Slavic, one detail never changes. She is always astonishingly beautiful. But in medieval Europe, beauty was not a blessing. It was a liability, a mark, a target. Beauty made a girl valuable not as a person but as property. Something to be taken, traded, controlled, silenced. Men fought for her, lied for her, killed for her, not because they loved her but because possessing beauty proved power. Sleeping Beauty is cursed not because she pricks her finger. She is cursed because the world desires her. That is the twist. That is the heart of the legend. That is the truth buried beneath centuries of softening, rewriting, and denial. The curse is not magic. The curse is the world's obsession with a powerless girl. And that is what the story has been warning us about from the very beginning. The original Sleeping Beauty tale was a whisper of warning, a story carried across centuries by those who needed to protect daughters from a world that refused to protect them. Yet today, the story lives another life. It exists everywhere, in films, in picture books, in nursery rooms, on toys, in theme parks glowing with light and laughter. But beneath the polished surface, the bones of the ancient story still remain. They wait in shadow, quietly speaking to those who know how to listen. Even now, if you pay attention, you can see the warning. Most modern adaptations have removed the violence, the violation, the hunger for power. They replace horrors with pastel castles, gentle music, and a kiss that makes all things right. Yet the shapes of the original remain like shadows beneath bright wallpaper. The cursed sleep, silent and endless. The thorns sharp and enclosing. The kingdom frozen in darkness. The lone figure who arrives. The hidden room untouched. These symbols survived because they were too iconic to erase, too old to understand without the world that created them. Today we see them as fantasy. Once they were warnings. Warnings so deeply rooted that even centuries of rewriting could not remove them. Every adaptation, knowingly or not, keeps the warning alive, even when buried beneath glitter. Disney's Sleeping Beauty is considered the definitive version, beautiful, iconic, elegant. But its beauty is a mask. It conceals a wound older than any film, older than the oldest written manuscript. The movie transforms a story of trauma into a story of true love. It replaces a brutal awakening with a soft kiss. It hides the violence behind fairies, spells, and pastel light. And for decades, audiences accepted that mask as truth. But if you look closely, the old story leaks through the cracks. The fairies hide the girl not because magic demands it, but because they fear what men will do. The thorns rise not just to block the villain, but to protect her from the world. The kingdom falls silent because the world is too dangerous for a girl who sleeps. The darkness is still there, quiet, but alive. Disney did not erase the tale. It covered it. And beneath the veil, you can still see the bones. Every generation retells Sleeping Beauty to suit its fears. In the Victorian era, it became a moral tale about chastity, shaping women into symbols of virtue and consequence. In the early 1900s, it became a ballet, celebrating silent beauty and obedience. In the late 20th century, it became pure romance, bright and musical. In the 21st century, people analyze it again as a metaphor for consent, trauma, and power, bringing the tale closer to its original warning than most retellings ever dared. The story evolves because the world's fears evolve. But one truth never changes. Sleeping Beauty is never in control of her own narrative, and that is the most chilling legacy of all. Even today, the darker versions of Sleeping Beauty are censored. Not because of magic or curses, but because of the awakening, the moment that exposes the core truth of the tale. Libraries remove these versions. Publishers tone them down. Parents avoid them. Centuries later, the darkness is still too real to face. And that alone proves the story's power. It unsettles us as deeply now as it did 500 years ago. Some truths never age. Some warnings never lose their bite. Sleeping Beauty matters today not because of romance, but because of resonance. It survived plagues, wars, religious upheaval, censorship, and constant rewriting because its message remains the same. A society that refuses to protect its most vulnerable is destined to fall into silence. We keep retelling the story because the world keeps repeating the warning. The maiden who cannot speak still walks among us. The thorns that defend her still grow in our culture. The silence around trauma still lingers in homes, in laws, in histories. Sleeping Beauty remains because it tells a truth we still struggle to face. Even as castles glow with light and fairies sparkle on screens, the bones of the old tale endure. And the warning, like a whisper, continues to echo. Watch, protect, listen, because those who are silenced today are still the heroines of tomorrow. In the end, a sleeping beauty is not a tale of romance, not a princess, not a fantasy, not a story of love or destiny. She is a mirror of fear, a mirror of silence, a mirror of desire, a reflection of the terror that grows when innocence is left unguarded. Her sleep is long, her awakening is violent. Her story, the true story, is buried beneath centuries of sugar-coated versions, hidden from children and adults alike. Yet the truth has never disappeared. It lingers in the margins of manuscripts. It whispers through folklore. It pulses beneath every retelling. The story persists because the truth persists. The thorns are not decoration, not punishment, not a curse. They are memory made visible. Every bramble a frozen scream, every root a mark left by a world that failed her. The forest that grew around Sleeping Beauty was not a prison. It was a shield. Nature intervenes when humanity fails. The thorns protect. They remember. They wait. They are born from pain, from neglect, from centuries of warning ignored. Every thorn whispers, do not forget, do not trust blindly. Do not allow innocence to be violated again. The prince, not a hero we imagine him as light, a savior, a golden figure, but he is not a hero, not chosen by love, not guided by destiny. He is a consequence, an intruder. A catalyst. He awakens her not because she wishes to, but because the world cannot allow silence to persist. Awakening is not romantic. It is an eruption, a confrontation with a reality that failed her long before she closed her eyes. The prince is not villain or hero. He is human, and humans rarely see what they cannot comprehend. The sleep that is not rest, we call it sleep. We imagine peace, softness. Her sleep was none of that. It is paralysis. Silence forced upon her. A life paused, a body trapped, and yet life moves on without her. Seasons change. Empires rise and fall. People love, betray, and forget. Time is a river. She is a stone sinking slowly to the bottom. Her sleep is abandonment frozen into centuries. The silence that SBAKS silence is not empty. It is full. It contains everything we refuse to say. Her silence is a scream turned inward, a story too painful to speak aloud. It echoes through centuries, speaking for every person ignored, dismissed, or silenced. We are disturbed not by her sleep, but because we recognize her silence. The kingdom that sleeps, the kingdom sleeps too, morally, spiritually. A kingdom that loses a child and accepts magic as explanation is a kingdom that chooses illusion over accountability. The courtiers cry, but do not change. The king rages, but does not protect. The queen mourns, but does not demand justice. They prefer myth to truth, comfort to responsibility, and so the kingdom continues, decade after decade, pretending this is fate. The awakening, that BURNS awakening, is not gentle. Imagine waking after a century of nightmares. Imagine your mind trying to carry all that time, all that silence, all that loss. Her eyes open, but sight overwhelms her. Her lungs fill, but air burns. Her muscles tremble under the weight of a life frozen in time. The thorns fall, her protection falls, the forest that shielded her retreats, and she faces the world once more. The kingdom celebrates. But beneath the bells and cheers, denial persists. Nothing is learned, nothing is repaired. The story ends in celebration, but her life continues in trauma. The inheritance of trauma survival is not recovery. Awakening is not healing. Trauma does not dissolve, it lingers, it clings, it follows. The kingdom sees a miracle, she feels loss. The prince sees destiny, she feels disorientation. The world applauds the symbol, she bears the weight of the reality, her story is co-opted. Her truth is softened, her voice is stolen. She awakens, but she does not return to life. She returns to a world that has moved on without her. Time as shadow 100 years pass, and yet she does not age. Civilizations crumble. Languages evolve, customs vanish, families die. She awakens to a ghost world, her home a memory, her parents gone or strangers, her childhood lost. She is no longer a girl, she is not yet a woman, she is a living artifact, a relic of survival, a testament to endurance, a warning to those who fail to protect the innocent. The thorns as her inheritance, the thorns remain. They are no longer merely defensive. They are memory. They are instinct. They are survival. Every bramble is a lesson. Every root is a warning. Every thorn is a shield. The forest has merged with her identity. It whispers, do not forget. Do not allow them to fail you again. She carries the forest inside her. It is part of her. It will always follow her. The silence as a weapon. Silence is strategy. Silence is defense. Silence is active. Every memory she keeps hidden is a thorn sharpened in the dark. The world may ignore it. The storytellers may rewrite it. But the silence persists, and those who survive learn to respect it. The prince as consequence. The prince is not salvation. He is consequence. He is intrusion. He awakens her body, but he does not awaken justice. He awakens reality. He awakens the world that failed her. Her awakening is not a gift. It is a challenge, a demand, a reckoning. The eternal cycle. Sleeping Beauty is eternal. She sleeps. She awakens. She sleeps again. She awakens again. Humanity fails. Humanity intervenes. Humanity ignores. Humanity repeats. Her story transcends time. She exists in every culture, every society, every human mind. She is the girl left unprotected, the voice ignored, the life dismissed, the trauma silenced. She is still sleeping, waiting, breathing, observing. The final whisper. Sleeping Beauty is not a tale of romance. She is a mirror of fear, a mirror of silence, a mirror of endurance, a mirror of truth. The thorns, the forest, the silence, the awakening, they are not fairy tales. They are lessons, lessons that stretch across centuries, lessons that grow, lessons that demand recognition. Sleeping Beauty exists still, in every child left unheard, in every trauma ignored, in every story rewritten to soften truth. And she waits, always, for the world to awaken. Sleeping Beauty is more than a fairy tale, more than a princess, more than a story whispered to children before sleep. She is a shadow cast across centuries, a reflection of fears we inherited without realizing, a reminder that even the gentlest legends are built upon wounds the world has never healed. The versions we know, the pastel colors, the softened curses, the gentle awakening, are only the outer shell, a painted mask. a careful distraction from a story that was never meant to be comforting. Because beneath every adaptation, every translation, every bedtime retelling, the same message remains. Unchanged, unbroken, unburied, a message carved in thorns, a message the world still refuses to confront. The weight of the thorns, consider the thorns. People see them as decoration, a dramatic backdrop, a clever way to keep the prince away. But thorns are never gentle. They are not pretty. They are not symbolic only of sleep, but of danger, of warning, of the barriers we build when the world outside becomes too cruel to face. The forest that grows around her is not magic gone wild. It is protection made visible. A fortress built not of stone, but of fear. Fear for her. Fear of what was done to her. Fear of what may happen again. These thorns are the memory of something the story never wanted to say aloud, that Sleeping Beauty was never safe, not even in her enchanted rest. And the world that watched her sleep was never innocent. The sleep that is not rest, we speak of her sleep as a blessing, a pause, a spell, a moment frozen in time. But her sleep is not peace. It is paralysis, isolation, a suspension forced upon her while the world continues without her consent. Look closely and you realize her sleep is a metaphor for every moment in history when voices, especially the most vulnerable, were silenced for convenience, for reputation, for power. Sleeping Beauty sleeps because the world is easier when she cannot speak, because silence to some is more comfortable than truth. Her slumber is not rest. It is what happens when the powerful decide that a girl's suffering is easier to hide than to confront. The awakening is not salvation. We glorify the awakening. We teach it as triumph. But Sleeping Beauty does not awaken to joy. She awakens into chaos, into danger, into a world that allowed her to fall and then forgot her. Her awakening in the oldest versions is not a moment of love. It is a moment of revelation. A brutal reminder that her life was never truly her own, that her fate was chosen for her, acted upon her, decided without her voice. The awakening is not salvation. It is exposure. A forced return to a world that failed her once and may fail her again. She rises not because she is ready, but because she must. Our silence is the true curse. Perhaps the true horror of Sleeping Beauty is not her sleeping, it is ours. How many times have we ignored the warning signs? How many times have we walked past suffering because it was easier than asking questions? How many times has silence been chosen over protection? Sleeping Beauty is a story about what happens when a society chooses quiet over justice, when people look away, when authorities fail, when danger grows in the shadows because naming it is too uncomfortable. Her tale persists because the world has not changed as much as we pretend. Her thorns still grow, her silence still echoes. Her warning still applies. We are the ones who sleep, dreaming of a world safer than it truly is. The story we carry, we tell Sleeping Beauty to children as if it were gentle, as if it were a lullaby. But fairy tales are not meant to soothe. They are meant to prepare. They carry history, trauma, fear, and truth through generations. They remind us that beauty can hide violence, that innocence can be fragile, that evil sometimes smiles before it strikes. When we strip away the darkness, we strip away the lesson. When we soften the story, we weaken the warning. Sleeping Beauty survives because the world still needs her, Not the princess, not the romance, not the kiss, but the truth. The final warning: remember her story, remember the thorns. Remember that silence is the oldest and deadliest curse we know. Sleeping Beauty's tale ends on a page, but its echo continues in every life, every home, every society that forgets the cost of looking away. She sleeps, she awakens, and through her we see ourselves, our failures, our fears, and the shadows we pretend are not there. The fairy tale ends, but the warning does not, because truths like these do not die, not even in dreams.